Welcome. Today is April the 23rd, 2013, and the meeting of the fiscal years 2014-2015 Urban Renewal Budget Committee is now called to order. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Neely?
Here.
Commissioner Mum? Here. Commissioner Pauly? Here. Commissioner Roth? Here. Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Zentner? Commissioner Rudisil? Here. Commissioner Geiger?
Here.
Commissioner Gifford?
Here.
Commissioner Edgar?
Here.
Commissioner Yates? Commissioner Stoll?
Here.
Commissioner Datchler?
Here.
And Chair Olson?
Here. Thank you. Tonight's meeting is available after the meeting on the city's website. I want to thank all of the city staff who dedicated their time and effort in preparation for this evening's Urban Renewal Budget Committee meeting. And I want to thank all of the members for attending tonight and being participants. Our rules of conduct require the commissioners, staff, and members of the public treat one another with dignity and respect at all times. As the presiding officer, the chair shall preserve order, discourage attacks on personalities or the including of commissioners and citizens' motives, and confine commissioner debate to the question under discussion. Persons in attendance at the meeting who become disorderly, abusive, or disruptive may be removed from the meeting. Our rules of conduct prohibit unreasonably loud, disruptive, or profane language. Clapping, cheering, or speaking out of order is discouraged. We thank you for your cooperation. We are now on agenda item 2 for reviewing the budget committee process, authority, and decisions. We will comply with ORS 294-414, which was renumbered from ORS 294.336 in 2011, that addresses the budget committee for municipalities. We will also comply with OAR 504.420, Oregon Department of Revenue Local Budgeting Manual, that was revised in June 2010. Specific attention is referenced to Chapter 8, the Budget Committee and approving the budget. Both of these documents are available online at Oregon.gov. We are now on agenda item 3, is our first order of business for the election of a chairperson. ORS 294.414 subsection 9 reads, the budget committee shall at its first meeting after its appointment elect a presiding officer among its members. Are there any motions for nominations?
So move Aaron Todd Colson to be chair.
Second.
Thank you, and I would like to make a nomination of Robert Stoll.
Second that nomination.
I'm going to make, if I might, a point of clarification. I'm going to ask the finance director. We went to the biennial budget process, and I believe that we felt that people that were currently on the budget committee would be extended into the next year. Is that correct?
Correct.
I don't know that the people that are ending this year are aware of that, so I don't know if that got communicated or not. And so it's because we went to a biennial. It didn't make sense to change a position in the middle of the budget period, and so I just wanted to make that point because you were telling me your term was up, and I didn't think it was, but maybe you never told it wasn't.
I guess this would qualify as discussion.
Yeah. But it has to do with the nomination process. That I think that anybody that's nominated here would be able to serve the full 2-year period, and that's the reason for that clarification.
Sure. So it's my understanding that Aaron Olson, in particular, his term is probably not due to expire December of 2013. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
So, okay. For clarity. Okay.
Yeah, actually, halfway to 2014.
Yeah, time flies. Yes. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Are there any other motions for nominations?
I move nominations be closed.
Okay. At this time, let's go ahead and take our vote. For chair of the Urban Renewal Budget Committee.
Sorry, I I didn't hear who the first one was for. Autumn, you nominated
Aaron.
Aaron. Okay, I didn't.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so
Aaron, by you nominating someone else, does that imply you don't want to do it?
That's a reasonable question. However, I will do with the committee decides, so I will make that comment.
okay, votes for Aaron.
You want us just to raise our hand?
Yes, please. Okay, 8 for Aaron and for Robert Stoll. Okay, Aaron, you are elected as mayor.
How'd that work out for you?
All right. Yes, thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that.
It might help to each give a speech.
That's right, that's right. Yeah.
Too late.
All right. Okay, thank you, Nancy, appreciate that. We're now on agenda item 4 is our next order of business. The approval minutes of the April 24th, 2012 Urban Renewal Budget Committee. The document is labeled Agenda Item 4A. I trust everyone has had an opportunity to read it. I haven't read it, so if I can find time, I'm sure you probably could have too. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. All right, is there a discussion? All right, by raising of your hand, please raise your hand if you approve the minutes of the April last year's meeting. Thank you.
Votes unanimous.
Yeah, very good. The motion passes unanimously. We are now on agenda item 5, calls for receiving the budget message from the budget officer. The report is marked agenda item 5A, and that will be given by our city manager, Dave Fractioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we're going to have a fairly short presentation tonight. We just have a handful of slides here. We're going to go through, you have your budget document, which I'm proud to say is on one page. We're not quite 100% paperless, but we're trying as best we can. What's important to remember about tonight's presentation, a number of things, but one of them is that what we're talking about in urban renewal is a statutorily restricted fund. So it operates very much like a enterprise fund, and that means the money that comes in is restricted in the way it can be spent, can't be reallocated to other projects, can't be moved around by the city. There is some flexibility in that, and of course, to the degree Oregon City has used that flexibility in the past, it's usually been fraught with some degree of criticism. So we look at this as a restricted fund that has to be used for the purposes in the urban renewal plan or those authorized by statute. Also, I think Mayor Neely brought this up, but essentially we have one citizen member tonight that we ordinarily would have had last year that we don't have now because of attrition and the fact that we're condensing the committee by a smaller group each year until all the terms are completed in the attrition. Some of the progress that I note for this year has really been the much more cohesive discussions. We still have a lot of diversity on the Urban Renewal Commission, but one of the things I'm most proud of our group and all of the staff that work with the group is the fact that despite the diversity of opinion, there's just much more collegiality among the members of the commission. And I think that's really speaks well of Oregon City and its ability to work together on complex issues. So this is not a good map. I'm sorry about this. That is your urban renewal district, but it's not very clear. It's very washed out. And on my copy, it's actually not. So I don't know what that's causing that. But anyway, that gives you a little bit of a look at what the district is. And I'll just go around the boundary here with this doodad. Here it is. Here's the Cove area. And then down here. This way.
The black dots.
Yeah. As many of you know, the maximum indebtedness is $130 million. You have a lot of room left to work on projects in the district because you've only got $13.6 million in obligations.
What are the black dots?
I don't know.
Mean nothing. I don't know. It's just 8 or something.
It's an aberration.
So you've got 844.63 acres. There's been talk, and mostly so far, it's just talk about what percentage can you expand the district, or could you bring in blue heron, things like that. And so you might keep that figure in mind, because it's based on a percentage of how you can expand the district beyond that percentage of 844 acres.
Can you explain that a little further? Based on a percentage of the city?
It's a percentage of the district.
Or percentage of the
Yeah,
district.
so you can do minor expansions, but you can't do major expansions without going to vote of the people.
When it was originally formed, when the
Yeah.
district was originally formed as a percentage of that.
And it is a percentage of the city as well.
There's a different.
Well, the urban
different
renewal
percentage.
district is up to a percentage of the city. It can be created up to a certain percentage, given the city square foot, yes.
So, yeah.
Well, is this the identical size of the district when it was put together, last reorganized in 1990? Has it changed
I
since
don't think there've been any-
1992, it hasn't changed, it hasn't.
1992.
Yeah, it's the same.
Okay, thank you.
And as you know, the mission of the urban renewal area is to eliminate blight. And that therein, that word blight is where all of our debate comes from, because, one man's trash is another man's treasure, as my grandfather used to say. And that is true when we talk about blight. So these are taken directly, these are verbatim out of your urban renewal plan that you have, that's been in adoption for several years and has been confirmed and affirmed by the various commissions over the years. And these are principally, I won't read them to you, but those are your, right out of the urban renewal plan. And these are core values that were created by the current Urban Renewal Commission. And we did a couple of different planning processes, actually 2 of them, and Eric will talk more about that later. But we did 2 of those processes this year. And these were the core values identified by the current commission about projects that they wanted us to pursue. When I see this one, I always think of Commissioner Edgar, because this is his favorite, I know, return on investment. We all have our favorites up here. That's sort of mine. That's probably Eric's, I don't know why. This might be Commissioner Smith's, and I don't know, somebody's going to have to claim this one. But they all go to the same, I mean, the idea here is that we want to make our city better through this process, and we're focusing those efforts in the district. And these are just a summary of some of the changes. Again, this is a biennial budget. It's the commission's first biennial budget. We didn't total up the number of staff hours that are saved by going to a biennial budget, because this budget is much smaller. But it's, probably close to 100 hours that it takes to do all the analysis to back up the urban renewal budget. It's more like 800 hours of staff time that's saved in the city budget going to a biennium. So you can see that the growth in the district as far as values, the increment is growing faster than inflation, which is always something I like to see. You can see that right here. And we have projected spending totaling $6.6 million. Of that $6.6 million, roughly $600,000 is going to be for admin and employee costs and those things, which is about a little under 10% of the total expenditures for the biennium, which I think is right on track with where I'd like to see our admin costs. So we're seeing a slight reduction to $6.3 million in 2014 and $800,000 less in 2015. We've continued funding in this budget for the adaptive reuse and rehab program and the storefront grant programs, which have been very successful, particularly the latter. And because we are working on some version of the Cove, and we all know there's been various versions of it, and we do have some money in contingency for that, and Eric will talk more about that here in a minute.
Are you taking questions in the middle of this, or?
I'm about to finish my last slide. I have one more, and then Eric is going to finish the presentation, and then, but if you want questions in the middle, we're fine with that too. You have
I
one?
guess that was one, yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
When you say the adaptive reuse storefront have been successful, I'm just hanging on the word successful insofar as I like them a lot. They look great. Is that increasing our tax
Yes.
base? That's the better definition of successful.
Well, I can't say yes very conclusively on the second point because we haven't done much on the adaptive reuse yet. And the work that has been done, I don't think has been
It's
reassessed.
been so recent, we haven't reassessed the
Right.
value yet.
But the storefront, definitely.
The storefront refurbishings and
Yes.
improvements have increased the tax base.
Yes,
So there is an ROI there.
yes,
Okay, that's what I want to hear.
okay.
So I will go over some of the accomplishments that we've achieved over the past year. And some of those do start out with the grant programs that we have. In 2012, 2013, the Urban Renewal Commission awarded a total of $162,463 in storefront improvements grants. As David said, it's become very successful. It's become very competitive. It is increasing the assessed value of our district. Due to the success of our program, we've been able to leverage $120,000 from Metro funds to augment this program for strategically located projects. Yes, sir.
What was the number of grants issued?
The number?
The number of grants.
The number in the past year, I've got that real quick.
Or I guess, do you know on average how much each grant was?
Well, yes, we have, just in 12-13, we had 2 carryovers from 11-12, and then we had 4 additional grants that were awarded, so 6 total.
I just, Paul Edgar, I went through the detail of those 5 or 6 of the storefront grants to see what the impact was on tax evaluation or assessed value, and each of them had 0. And the reason for it was the assessor said, when you replace a window, that is just replacing a window, and it doesn't affect assessments. So when you go through them, and when we say carte blanche, that it erased it, it's the district as a whole, not individual storefront grants
correct.
themselves.
Right. That's
And it's the beautification of
Right.
the city that's created other halo effects. But individually, the storefront grants themselves, when you look at property by property, that's not the case.
That's basically correct, yes. So it's more of an indirect benefit that they have, yes.
Mr. Underwood, you said the program is successful but competitive. What's the process that a Main Street store owner goes through to get one of the grants, and what's the average award that he gets? If the total was $150,000?
$162,463.
So what's the process then if I'm a storefront owner? How
So
do I apply for it?
there's-
How do I get it?
There's an approved set of criteria and an application, so they would go to the website basically or contact one of us to obtain an application. They would complete that, and they would have to meet all the criteria for the application to be deemed complete. We have an internal review committee made up of staff members. Each member is an expertise in one of the fields that applies to the grant application. We make sure it's complete. We have a set of criteria that we judge the application by. We score points, and we make a recommendation to this Urban Renewal Commission for an award based on a calculation. And so then it's reviewed by the Urban Renewal Commission, and they can accept our recommendation or change it or do whatever they want to do with that recommendation.
So it's just a block grant, and they don't have to tell us what they're going to use the
Yes, they
money
do.
for?
Yes, they do. Yeah, it's part of the criteria. They have to give us a very detailed project scope with that. Otherwise, it's not deemed complete. So, and then the maximum grant award is $40,000, and that's if they can show that they are restoring the facade of the building or bringing it back to its original historic facade. That's the only way they can achieve the maximum, that $40,000. Typically, a maximum grant's $20,000 if they don't go above and beyond. And it's a one-to-one match.
And it's actually better than a one-to-one match for us because we've got Metro funds.
Right, exactly.
It's like a two-to-one or three-to-one match.
It could be, yeah, depending on the amount of private investment that they're putting in as well.
I mean,
So,
how much of the budget we spend, how much came from Metro?
We had one project that came through with Metro, and they spent $20,000, and we've spent, 162.
How
So
does the Metro funding of our program work? Do they get to see the application before they write the check? I thought they just wrote us a big check, no?
what they do is we have identified certain projects that we feel are strategic projects in the district that would help the district gain that increased assessed value. They work with the client in parallel for basically design services. So if one of those storefronts or property owners applies for a grant, they wait for approval from us before they're working with that group. And so they apply their money after approval from us to augment their design and their facade improvements.
The match is, I misunderstood this earlier. So what Metro does is assist, not us, but the building owner with their funds.
Right, so they help make it a better project in the end. They up the ante. So say if a property owner came in and they wanted to paint the front of their building and put in a few new windows and maybe a door front, well, okay, so that's approved through our grant. Metro will step in and apply additional money so they can maybe make another entry, put parapet walls there, just enhance the design to make it look even better, or maybe even restore it back to more of the original facade.
And do they have a match requirement as well, Metro?
No, they don't.
So does the building owner then get to use the Metro grant for his match, or does the match for?
No, they do not. They do not use that money for a match.
Curious, okay.
Mr. Underwood, one last question.
Sure.
Are we tracking how many of these businesses have applied for and received these grants and then gone out of business a year or 2 or 3 years later? Do we know that happened?
I don't. I'd have to go back. None have gone out of business with the grant recently with the grants that I've
These grants are for the
managed.
building more than for the
Yeah,
business.
this is for the property owner more than the business.
Yeah.
All right, these are reasonable questions. If you could proceed.
Sure.
One other question, which pertains to what was asked before. The storefront grants don't improve the assessed value, but the rehab programs grants, I presume, do. Is that right?
They do. They work to create a tenable space. And what might normally be a vacant building, untenable building, these are focused on creating the space where you would bring in jobs or mixed-use component, making that a higher value.
And I want to say something too about that, because Commissioner Edgar, you made a point, but that point has to be balanced against the reality that there's a distinction between triggering a reassessment that's going to show up by the assessor and triggering an increase in value. So those of us, for example, who remodeled our homes know that you get to a certain point and you're going to get a visit from the assessor. But if you don't get to that point, you can do a lot to improve the value of your property on the market, but it might not necessarily trigger a change in the assessment. So we know we're improving the values in the district.
I went through the detail of all assessment gains within the urban renewal district to try to ID this, where the source of them came. 60% came from PGE, as an example.
Right. Absolutely. That's in my memo, by the way.
Done by the state. And so when we went through the detail of where any gain was, it melted it down significantly. So it's all in the details.
And plus, I think even more so with the adaptive reuse, you get that halo effect that Paul was mentioning earlier, that you with the adaptive reuse, you have the potential of creating additional employment. You have more people coming into the district. You have the potential of creating a residential component with this, which you're going to have people living there, which is going to make it ultimately more appealing in the district in the long run. So that, to me, I think is a higher value than what the storefront would be. So continuing on, the adaptive reuse was initiated, or the criteria was approved in 2012, and we got that going in late spring. And since that time, we've awarded $210,000 in grants.
Since when?
Since late spring 2012. This program, too, is becoming increasingly competitive. Actually, I was on the phone with 2 potential applicants this morning that are anticipating the next round of funding with very sizable projects. So we're anticipating even more competitiveness in 13-14 and 14-15. We initiated a marketing campaign for our infill redevelopment lots this past spring. We're calling it the Land of Opportunity. We've had signs created. We've used various media to market these sites. We've had some bites. We're working with one client now on the 12th and Main property, and they have indicated to us that they plan on moving forward with that project. So our sites are 922 Main Street, which is 10th and Main, 12th and Main, and then 1910 Clackamas Drive, which is next to Clackamas Cove, or Clackamas Park. The properties have been advertised on OPB, both TV, radio, and website. 2 national publications, Business Expansion Journal and Business Expansion Solutions. The Business Expansion Solutions takes our ads to trade shows and matches them up with potential developers who are interested in this type of development. And we receive a list of these interested clients from these trade shows, so we're able to connect with them on that. We use various websites. We use the Daily Journal of Commerce, Clackamas County Answer Guide, the City of Oregon City websites, and CoStar. We work with the county, if you've heard of CoStar. It's a real estate inventory database. The train depot, as mentioned before, we've been working with architects to develop design drawings for tenant improvements for that building. We are very close to completion on that, and we should be distributing an RFP for construction here within the next week and a half or so.
Where?
The train depot, Amtrak station.
When will we see those design ideas?
The design ideas. We're going to get a GC on board, and he's going to work with the architect to develop the revisions after the last after the last Urban Renewal Commission meeting. We wanted the architect to go back and make some modifications on the design. So we're going to do that with the general contractor, so he's in sync with us and when we go to construction. So we should have that very soon. I would say within the next 3 weeks or so.
You got a question?
So there's been a lease executed by Bicycle Cafe Business, is that what am I getting?
Right. So right now, who we have to fill that space is it's Bicycle Cafe. It's related to the tourism industry. It would also be kind of a Oregon City business highlighting area. So he would invite existing Oregon City businesses down to very cheaply lease a space for about a month or so to highlight their product and their business due to the expected traffic that he intends on getting from the rail line and the bicycle tourism industry.
So is the rent market?
I'm sorry?
Is the rent market that was...
I can't hear you.
Is the rental rate market for the lease that was executed then? I'm just curious, the rental rate.
We haven't established that yet. So we haven't gotten that far.
So I think we should actually concentrate on the budget tonight. I mean, and then we can take all these policy questions at the end, so if you can get through your presentation. Okay. In an effort to obtain some quick wins, we focused on some efforts and funding into these following projects. Again, the Amtrak station, the Bicycle Cafe. We've budgeted $53,000 and the next biennium for completion of tenant improvements and design. We've got the McLaughlin Boulevard Enhancement Project Phase 2. It'll include improvements to the section between Dooms Drive and the Clackamas River Bridge. A total of $930,000 has been budgeted over the next 2 years for this phase of the project.
Now, is that matched with ODOT, and who else is helping us build that road project?
I believe there are some ODOT funds involved there, John. I think he's looking at it.
That's right, you should know that. Sorry.
You have federal funds. A whole bunch of things. Metro.
McLaughlin Boulevard.
Who else is helping
Who's
finance that
helping?
besides the
Federal
district?
government, Hamilton Metro is helping fund that, as is Urban Renewal.
And
And
so
then
there's
there's
not,
$250,000 through the state for the stormwater revenue.
okay, so we have U.S. Department of Transportation through Metro, no ODOT funds?
No step state investment.
No state funding except for the stormwater retrofit program. The rest of it's federal funded.
And how much federal funds for that project to match our 930?
3.4 million.
So 3.4 million federal, 0.93 state, and 250, excuse me, 9.
Now, the way the project's funded is $4.6 million project. 3.4 million is federally funded. A little less than 250,000 is the stormwater retrofit program, and 1 million, or a little less than 1 million for urban renewal.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Chair, I have a document here from 2009, written by Lita Foreman, which spells out that the state identified this intersection, or this area of Highway 99E, as a area that needed improvement. And on the last page of this two-page document, it says on point 8, the city must invest public funds responsibly and in the public's best interest. Therefore, the use of public funds should not be used for an improvement that potentially creates substandard design elements, operational problems, and are found to be short-term and obsolete when considering long-term solutions. The area was recently identified in the TSP as being a major problem area for congestion. And this improvement that we're doing does not eliminate or improve congestion or eliminate it in any way, because there's not one element of it is transportation oriented other than bikes and pets. And so what we're doing is, when we do this, we're creating a condition, and I'm pretty knowledgeable in transportation, where this area will not be visited again for funding or improvements for the next 20 years. And it has already been identified, not only that it is substandard, but I'm concerned that the better solution is actually for us to pony up some additional money and create more capacity there, rather than not do the project, but to make it better so that we eliminate at the same time congestion in the area. And this would be in a better for us, and it's part of a budgetary item. And I would propose that what we need is another 12-foot lane that comes from right after, going southbound after the overpass over Main Street, going down to McDonald's. And this would then eliminate approximately 80% of the backup and congestion, and allow the free flow of traffic around to the properties that we're trying to develop for employment and investment. Right now, that cannot happen in a great period of time, particularly peak periods. And it inhibits then our ability to create economic development in a vital economy. So if I was to be making a suggestion out of this, and I wanted others to hear it, I think we should add additional money in to give Public Works and our design team the opportunity to solve some of the congestion problems. If it can be done feasibly and economically, this would be in the best interest of creating jobs and economic investment in our area, including the two big, large parcels right next to McDonald's, each representing about an acre, and plus the whole cove. The way it is right now, no one going southbound in peak periods can get even to Dunes Drive. It backs all the way up to the Clackamas River Bridge. That's really unacceptable. There's a solution to get out of it. I just hope that other people will consider it.
How much?
What was the date on that letter again, please?
The original, this was done in January 15th. Here, I'll pass it to you.
Sure.
How much money do you think that would cost, Paul?
I'm not an engineer, but I've talked to some people about it, and it could be done for less than $500,000.
We have an engineer. and-
Yeah, I was going to say, you're not an engineer, I'm not an engineer. I don't know if there's anybody on this
Yeah, and
body that
just,
is.
just for clarity here, the date on this letter is January the 15th, 2009, and I'm sure that this was submitted to the city.
This was
and-
part of the Cove project
Sure.
plan.
Sure.
And it was part of identifying congestion points that could affect the development of the Cove. And so at that time, they identified this as a major congestion point that could affect the viability of developing the Cove in those properties.
I would suggest we have a professional come up and speak to this.
Right now?
Please do.
Chair, may I suggest that Mr. Underwood complete his presentation so that
that'd be
whoever's
nice.
testifying doesn't have to have the glare in their eye?
Sure,
Okay,
sure.
that's fine.
No, I'm glad that you pointed that out.
It's good for John Davenport.
You're almost done. Just keep
Okay,
going.
yeah. So,
We'll revisit that after the presentation.
one of the priorities over the past year was North End opportunities, economic development opportunities in North End downtown. We did take an inventory of those development opportunities for infill development, job creation, and mixed use. This inventory will be applied toward business development and recruitment efforts in the future. The storefront improvement grant, typically we budget $100,000 each year for this line item. And however, due to the community response and the popularity of the program, we're proposing a budget of $240,000 over the biennium. Adaptive Reuse Rehabilitation Program, the budget proposed for the biennium totals equals $425,000. Part of that is some carryover from this year, and will be used for retrofitting existing buildings for reuse, consistent with the goals of the district. Examples of this could be conversion of vacant or underutilized space, as I said before, on second and third story spaces to residential use, or conversion of ground floor to retail use. And over the past year and a half, the Urban Renewal Commission has been working with the developers of the Cove without a contract or a DDA. The market conditions have had extreme negative impact on this project, and it's been scaled back considerably from the mixed-use development to a multifamily residential development consisting of approximately 200 units. At this time, the developer has submitted a new version of the Cove project, which includes substantially different funding model. Currently under review by staff with the Urban Renewal Commission, with many discussions to follow. While we've not budgeted funds directly for the Cove project, funds are proposed for future developer incentives, as we will discuss this later in our presentation. So these are some urban renewal revenue projections. The proposed urban renewal budget is funded by total anticipated biennial revenues of $4.7 million. This excludes the beginning balances. $2.2 million in 2014 and $2.5 million in 2015. This represents annual increases in property tax revenues from the actual 2012-2013 assessment of $167,500 and $53,560 in 2014 and 15 respectively. The increase is based on projected assessed value increases of 3.5% and 2.5%. Fiscal year 2013 budget included anticipating borrowings of $6.55 million in anticipation of the Cove project. However, the project hasn't progressed, so the borrowing is not required. Excuse me. Yes.
How close did we come in our growth projections from the last time we did this? Last time we projected, what, 5.5?
No, I don't.
5.2? No, I'm sorry. What had we projected last time?
Thank you, Committee Member Gifford. And actually, I don't recall what we budgeted the last time for the increase because I wasn't here, but I know that we did have a 10% increase this last year due to PGE's personal property that they put on their sites, and so that wasn't anticipated. I'd guess that we probably anticipated 2.5% to 3%. So we did have a little bit of a windfall this year. And the budget, as proposed, does not include that increase in years, in the first or the second year. We're back to 3.5% and 2.5%, which is more consistent with what we're seeing around the region.
Mr. Parnell, quick question, since I have you.
Yes, sir.
On page 1, I don't know, it says under budget highlights that 92% of which are property tax revenues. I was kind of curious where the other 8% comes from. Is that ending fund balance from the previous year?
That's an excellent question, Committee Member Geiger. So on page 6 of the budget, where you have the resources, or page 6 of this document, or on the budget one-pager that we have, the simple budget we call it, property taxes make up 92% of the revenues coming in during the biennium. There's also interest income, some rental income from a couple of the properties that we own, and some other things. And then beginning balance isn't included in that, but as you know, that's the working capital that we would have available at the beginning of the biennium.
Okay, thanks.
Moving on. And here we are in the resources. So this proposed urban renewal budget is funded by totaling anticipated biennial revenues of, wrong one. It shows property taxes being the majority of all urban renewal resources, 53%, with reserves making up 42%, excluding beginning balances. Property taxes actually make up the 92%. Projected spending for the combined 2 years totals $6.66 million, excluding ending balances. As shown here, this represents decreases of over $6 million the first year and an additional $800,000 in the second year. Proposed expenses include the following. We have $1.85 million in materials and contracted services, including administrative and legal, as well as $1 million in development project incentives. The $1 million set aside for the event that a project comes forward to the URC requesting or requiring incentivizing for future development. The project would be brought to the Commission for approval, of course, and the funding would be readily available. $1.7 million in capital projects, including continued funding of the adaptive reuse, rehab, and storefront grant programs at a combined total of $720,000, and monies for the McLaughlin Boulevard Phase 2 project in the amount of $930,000. There are $3.1 million in debt repayments. On the expenditure side, repayment of debt makes up the majority of required spending, at almost 38%.
Can I ask a question about the debt?
Yes.
The debt service, because I don't really understand why the numbers seem to be climbing each year. I thought in a previous slide, I saw that we borrowed some money in 2010, but I don't recall any. Why are the interest rates, why is the debt service increasing each year over the course of the last 4 years? We haven't borrowed any money in a while, I didn't think.
Astute observation, Committee Member Yates, and we have, there's 3 debts outstanding. One is our original loan with Bank of America that funded the operations for several years. We did refinance the U.S. Bank line of credit into a 10-year term, and the debt that's coming due in 2015, the second year, is repayment to the city for the monies that were borrowed to build the City Hall. So that's going to be repaid over a 5-year period starting in the second year of this biennium. So it looks like debt payments are increasing, and they are, but that's sort of the beginning point when that.
So the city just basically borrowed money from us for several years and is only now beginning to pay it back? Is that right?
The urban renewal borrowed from the city $1.9 million.
Or just the reverse?
And it was set up to be a balloon payment in year 5 or extended for an additional 5-year terms. And I'll need to come back to the Urban Renewal Commission and ask for an extension because we're required to meet certain bond covenants,
Okay.
so we can't make the full balloon payment.
And then just so I get a broad understanding of the bond situation, we have that 5-year payout to ourselves essentially. What else do we have outstanding and what's the term?
Outstanding, you got that correct on the 5-year payout to ourselves. We have U.S. Bank 10-year term, $3.446 million.
How much? What's the percentage rate on that?
It's 2 issues, one taxable, one tax exempt. Taxable is 4.5, tax exempt is 3.
Okay.
0.05. And the original Bank of America loan, it was $10 million to start with back in 2008. There's $8 million outstanding, 4.95%.
And these monies were expended over the course of the last several years on the cove and the rivers and.
Correct, and
basically
funding the
running-
operations
Running in
of the-
circles. Okay.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you. Continue with your presentation.
Thank you, thank you. Materials and services are making up approximately 23% of the expenditures in this biennium budget, and we're looking at about 21% for capital outlay. Contingency is made up of the projected ending balance of $1.5 million. That's being reserved for future years. Thank you.
No?
There are little gnomes underneath.
They're half the numbers.
Urban renewal gnomes?
So this is just trying to indicate some sort of trend and increment. There's really not much of a trend here. I know this is a request from last year, but we're showing this year as well. And the 1213 indicates the injection from the PGE project that was completed.
There is a trend that goes up and down.
Goes up and down, right, yeah.
What happened in 11?
Ebb and flow.
The 10% in 11 and 10, 11, that was,
I don't know.
I'm not sure exactly what happened there. That was before,
It's interesting.
yeah.
I think we could do a trend line that would show it going up.
Probably the Singer Hill Cafe remodel.
Yeah.
That might
Actually, they goosed me a couple of years before that.
It'd be nice to see the projection.
Yeah, but this increase is not expected to be duplicated in the forthcoming years. We're projecting, as we stated before, 3.5% in 2014, and I'm sorry, 3.5% in 2014 and 2.5 in 2015. So now it's time for questions.
Turn off the light.
Hey, Eric, I have a follow-up question. This is in reference to the marketing strategy. Are you finding out that with the advertising that's being somewhat effective?
It's somewhat effective, yeah. We've had some bites at the apple, so to speak. We've also, in addition, which I didn't mention in the presentation, but in addition to the media that we're using, we're also conducting developer tours. So we personally invite developers that typically do mixed-use type development or residential development, and show them the sites and answer any questions we can on site. So, and that's pretty effective. That sparks some interest and gets others talking. So.
Excellent. Thank you. Right. Okay. The lights are off, so hopefully there's no blinding sensation there. And John is going to go ahead and provide his comments in reference to that memorandum dated January 15, 2009, project, the Cove development, and the Oregon 99E enhancement project.
Right, so Paul was kind enough we met with Paul, and he's kind of kept me informed. I appreciate that, because it's much better kind of working together on these issues when there's differences of opinion. So what I thought I'd do is go through the project a little bit, just so I'm not sure how familiar everybody is with the project. So I didn't bring thank you. So essentially the project starts at the Clackamas River Bridge, or our end of the Clackamas River Bridge, and extends up to the intersection of Dunes Drive. Includes Firestone Alley, or what we call Firestone Alley. That's a little side road, some improvements there. It's really a bicycle and pedestrian project. If you look at this closely, you'd see, or if you're familiar with the area, you'd see that off the backside of the sidewalk, the slopes drop off very, very steep through pretty much until you get up to near the McDonald's property. Everything on this side up into the Firestone Alley is, again, very steep. There are some improvements on Dunes Drive that we're proposing and always have proposed.
North is on your left, right? Okay.
Yes, sorry. North is behind this drawing, so Portland. Andy. Median, planted median, street trees, street lighting, wider sidewalks, some gateway features down here that are still in the project, and some stormwater.
We don't see 205 is off the map.
Right, 205 is quite a,
Yeah, it's off the map.
Behind Chris.
Right. So the other thing I'll mention is this project, which hopefully will have even better graphics than what we were showing today, is scheduled to have an open house on April 30th from 5:30 to 7. So please show up for that. This is a federally funded project. It's not all federally funded, as we just talked about, but it's majority of it's federally funded project, which makes it a completely different type of project from a regulatory or a process perspective. And I think that's important, and I'll come back to that. It's also a Metro Transportation Enhancement Improvement Project, which means Metro is taking those federal funds and allocating them to all the projects that they've awarded, and this was one of them. This project is really, I found documentation on it back to 2008, and my sense is that Nancy was probably working her magic even before that, but the project prospectus and the grant application was dated in 2008. So it's been around for a while. We've been talking about it for a long time. The city's actually received 3 extensions, and I think a lot of that had to do with we were successful with getting the grant, but we had a lot of other things going on, and the region recognized that, and they felt it was important enough to continue, so they've kind of given us extensions to do that. We're on our final extension at this point in time. Yes, Commissioner Pauly.
To be federally funded, did it have to meet certain requirements through the grants? And was one of the requirements traffic flow and?
Okay, I'll get to that, but great question, because that is key to this kind of issue, which, so mentioned grant, we mentioned Metro. The other thing I want to mention is this is an ODOT facility, so they're involved because it's their facility. So they approve a lot of the invoicing from consultants and contractors. I already talked about the budget, but I'll go over that again. Right now it's looking like a $4.6 million project, which includes consultant fees and includes construction costs and includes staff time as well, ODOT and city staff. $3.4 million of that is federally funded. $250,000 approximately is for the stormwater retrofit program. There are some stormwater improvements that will happen here and over here near the hotel. And then the $1 million that Urban Renewal committed. And I found that commitment, Sean, you'd asked me a question about this. I found it in the original grant application. I don't know how far back the discussions went on that, but it was an original commitment that was specific to, in 2008, that was specific. That specific designation was listed in the grant application.
And it's been in our budget ever since?
I believe it has. Yeah, I believe it has. I didn't study those, but maybe, I'm sure it has. I wanted to read from the grant application something, because I thought it was important, and this speaks to the kind of project it was and why it was granted these funds. First of all, this is a what Metro and other regional partners call a boulevard street design standard. So they were looking specifically at pedestrian improvements, gateway features, not necessarily at moving vehicles. So one thing I'll step back on just before I read this, the issue that Paul's talking about, and I know this is small, and I'm sure some of you can't see this, but the problem that we see on McLaughlin Boulevard is that the turning movement to get onto I-205 southbound off of 99E southbound backs up, okay? And so there's not enough storage or ability to move traffic out onto 205. So when that happens, it backs up into this, what would be your left-hand through movement, okay? So there's the first lane as you're headed southbound is for Oregon City Shopping Center. It's a turn lane. The second and the third lane are for through movements. But the second one is the one that backs up often because of what's going on at the 99E interchange or I-205 interchange. And then there's this other through lane eventually kind of queues up for the northbound 205 lane. And then there's one other through lane, which is really the through lane that lets you go through the interchange and into Oregon City. And what Paul has suggested is we should extend that and provide more storage, right? So that when those two through lanes stack up back into here, they essentially could prevent a vehicle from being able to get through Oregon City. And so by extending that, we you know, if the project were to move more traffic or provide more storage for more backup, then it would be, we'd have to take that, what would be the outside through lane. It also allows for turning movements to happen there. We'd have to extend it back. There's constraints along there that we're concerned about, which include public right-of-way, the slope, and the walls that would be required. And the bridge is really, I mean, Paul's not suggesting any widening there. He's saying, why not, carry that lane all the way, back here. And, if we're talking about moving traffic, more lanes, more traffic, more movement of traffic. But the real problem is the interchange. And everybody in the region recognizes that interchange is the problem. In our TSP, the project that's been identified is the interchange, not this section of roadway.
Which interchange? The freeway interchange?
The freeway interchange,
okay.
right? So more storage, both on the 99E to I-205 southbound, more storage lanes on those ramps with enhancements to the metering that goes on there. Also, more ramp capacity coming off of 205. So if you're headed northbound, coming off 205. So the two, well, I guess the two that kind of curve around, whether you're going northbound or southbound, those are projected for more lanes. That does some fixes. It doesn't necessarily completely fix the interchange. The complete fix for the interchange requires more lanes across the river, really, on 205, so a wider bridge. And that's a big project that there's no funding for, no regional. So just know that this area over here is not going to get a lot better, even with some ODOT improvements. And we're always going to see some traffic backing up into this intersection. Okay, so, well, I'm on a roll. I'm on a roll. You want to let me
allow me to finish?
Even I keep my mouth shut.
So Paul's point about extending provides some storage capacity, and I think from a traffic movement perspective, makes some sense. The problem, though, is where we're at right now. We're at 60% design. This has been a project that's been in the queue for at least since 2008. Okay, and when we got this grant, we got it not for lane capacity. We got it for pedestrian improvements, enhancements to our gateway and bicycle facilities. That's kind of Metro's thing, if you haven't figured that out already. So, so I want to read from the physical description. Just to kind of this was part of our application, and it's continued to be the understanding of the project stakeholders, which is really Metro, the state, and the feds, to be quite honest with you. So, implement the McLaughlin Boulevard Enhancement Plan in mixed-use area. To include wider sidewalks and improved pedestrian crossing, landscape buffer between sidewalks and arterial, median landscape, median where possible, gateway treatments and public art, bus stop amenities, improvement for bicycle environment, architectural railing, placing chain link fence, new lighting, improved pedestrian connections to regional trail, regional park, waterfront, skate park, sidewalk, infill on Dunes Drive. There's several places in this application where there's no mention, and I would say been little discussion beyond what's come up recently here about the idea of widening and providing more lane capacity out there. And I think the concern that really I have is that we've got strong support for this project from our partners that are funding this, and I think that includes urban renewal. This just recently came up a couple weeks ago, so until that time we've been kind of moving down that path. That we've got to support a project that's supported by this Urban Renewal Commission. I think that the difference from a federal perspective between a project that doesn't touch travel lanes and a project that does is big. A lot of this and the project perspective that was submitted and approved, there'd be a lot more triggers that we would have to respond to if it were listed as a project that involved travel lanes. And it would be a bigger footprint because, well, it looks pretty slim on a map like this, a small cut. It pushes everything out into areas that, yeah, we've got right-of-way there, but it would require more fill, require more wall, a lot more project expense, and the feds would look at it differently. In fact, in our original submittals, we were able to do what they call a, let's see if I can find my notes on this. Well, they basically don't require us to submit much for certain things like historic preservation or the environmental concerns, those kind of things, hazardous materials, noise, air, all of those things get triggered the minute we add additional travel lanes. And the Fed would require it, I think we'd lose our funding for this project. We'd definitely delay this project. And we haven't gone as far as asking the funding agencies what they really think about adding lanes to this. But our suspicion is because this is our third extension on this particular grant, from staff and really, I guess it's more of a city perspective, I think we lose some credibility because we've been into this for so long, and with the funding environment that we're in, I was just in a funding meeting today. I mean, it's very competitive. Others will snap up the opportunity to get that funding. So even if this group said, we've got somewhere around $500,000, we haven't done a hard estimate, but between the consulting fees, probably the studies that go into, some of meeting those federal requirements, assuming they say, yeah, go ahead and move forward with this additional scope. Those things are all going to be costly. And so, the construction costs, maybe $300,000, but we're probably going to spend much more than that for those other services. So I really think that if, where is it that a traffic engineer won't tell you add more lanes to move more traffic? But that wasn't the intent of this project, and I think we really risk a lot if we continue to move down the path of inquiring and pursuing additional lane. So I think I've done it.
Ready for questions?
What is the estimated dirt shoveling ceremony? When are you going to start?
We're at 60% now. My recollection is we start somewhere in November
this year.
2013.
2013.
Can I make a comment?
Please do.
I would like to step up here for a second. Not that I'm an engineer, but I've spent a great deal of time looking at this. And as we come down through here, and I took John.
Where's McDonald's on this map?
Right here.
Okay.
Right here. These are the two developable lots that we have that are effectively for sale right now. And when you come across this overpass of Main Street overpass right here, there's kind of a little bump out here, and this is where any improvement would take place going down towards McDonald's. And we're effectively moving the bike trails and everything out of the roadway right now. And this is all within right-of-way. We're not purchasing any right-of-way. And if we plan, even if we don't build it, we plan to have that extra 12-foot lane through here. Because right now, this traffic is backing up here. So these 3 lanes right here are effectively stopped for quite a significant time when you can't get any car movement to McDonald's, around to these lots, around to the Cove. You can't get cars in through Oregon City. So in these peak periods, we're at the crunch. It has been considered LOS in the level of service F standards, which means no more growth. So officially, somebody could turn around and say, I could go to building and say, if you increase more flow, we could shut you off and say you can't issue a building permit. So this is how severe this type of congestion can be. So we need to actually, so I'm not trying to stop the plan to enhance it. I'm trying to impact it positively to create conditions that allow us to grow and allow us to sell property, to get investment, improve our economy. And right now, when we looked at our TSP shows us that this is at LOSF right now. That says stop, no more permits, no more activity.
How many other LOS Fs are in the works?
That's what I was going to ask. How many?
For the benefit of viewers, could you describe what that is?
There's a scale from A to F. Let's say C is good, that means it's acceptable. D is on the margin. You get D and F, you kind of flow through to this. F is the final thing where that's the end of the game. As an example, I'm on the Clackamas County Transportation Advisory Committee. They were talking about in around the Clackamas Town Center that if we don't solve a problem, there will be no more building permits authorized in and around the Clackamas Town Center, like at Sunnybrook or on some areas of Sunnyside Road, because traffic is not going through there, and everybody's eyes open up and say, wow, we got to do this.
John has something to say.
So this problem is a regional problem. By the way, in Oregon City, we've got Beaver Creek 213.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yes.
one of those.
That's an F?
That's an F.
Yes.
This one here is 99E, and
It used to be the jug handle, right?
used to be the jug handle. There's one other project that I want to say is at 213 and 205. So there's, and regionally, there's a lot of this going on, and it's a hot topic right now for ODOT, and really what's coming down is that our growth is more than we can afford to build our way out of, and so the region is looking at new standards instead of level of service.
Call it VC, volume over capacity.
Yeah, instead of but that's just, there's a difference between how they rate it, that's one thing, but they're just looking at standards that would allow for more congestion. And that's a regional problem. We're going to have to figure out how to work through that as a region. But that's kind of beyond, in my opinion, what we can do here. I mean, we've got this capacity problem at the interchange, and I want to point out too, Paul's recommending investment in public infrastructure using urban renewal funds. I can't tell you how
And I think we've dedicated enough time on this topic.
We have that on tape.
Yeah, okay,
right?
good. I do.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Paul.
My God.
We're gonna proceed forward here, and
Yes.
I think, Sean.
So now I've been waiting for a question that's more of an educational side to all of this, because I'm also on the McLaughlin Project Committee, and I support it, but I see these kind of funds here, and they've been on our agenda for 5 years now. How do you evaluate $1 million for something like this if another project comes in the future to look at an ROI? I mean, we're way down the game on this one. I'm not looking at changing this one, but next year we sit here and somebody else is bringing us another $1 million project. I would hope that the people 5 years ago asked what that ROI is. I'm just curious how you explain that or evaluate that to us.
So I wasn't here 5 years ago, so I can't tell you if they asked those questions. I mean, for me, if our staff was submitting a project like that, I would be asking, for example, what do we think is going to generate in additional capacity? What's the additional growth by bringing the intersection up to a higher standard? And when it comes to this intersection, I'm just going to mention the Willamette Falls Legacy Project because I actually think that is going to be a catalyst for a lot of these improvements we're talking about. And the kind of funding it's going to take to really redo that interchange the way it is going to have to be done. If we're successful, for example, in bringing 500,000 new visitors to Willamette Falls over the next several years when we're down there for the ribbon cuttings, we're going to have a completely different transportation solution to get those people in and out of that site safely, and that's going to be part on 205 is going to take major federal highway funding. So that's the answer. Now, your question I think is more tailored. What would we normally look at for a protocol for evaluating these projects? And that's when we not only look at what we think the assessed values are going to be and how they're going to be affected. I mean, that's what you need to be looking at here at Urban Renewal. How many jobs are going to be created, what's proposed for the area, and that's why we would stick to our Urban Renewal plan or a revised version of the Urban Renewal plan, and whatever those triggers are, we would look at each one.
Thank you.
Thank you. Phil, you had a question?
I used to live in Wilsonville. We had these level F things at the freeway, so you get from one side of the freeway to the other, and they didn't stop development unless you had, they had trips and things they made us do. You had to figure out how many trips you had for your development. It gets very, very dicey. The question I have for John is, one of the things that happened in Wilsonville too, which just drove us crazy, was they put in a lane and then 6 months later they'd rip it out. And then they put in a lane and 6 months later they'd rip it out. I mean, it happened over and over again. And what I wonder is, it sounds like the horses left the barn on this one. I don't think it makes any sense to rock the boat. But is there something we can do without rocking the boat that avoids if we in fact do need another lane, do need Paul's idea in 6 months or a year or 5 years, is there any way we can plan for it in some way without upsetting the fence? It seems to me we ought to at least explore that before the horse really leaves the barn.
Mayor's going to respond to that.
Well, sort of.
Try to.
The legacy project is going to be kind of a direction shifter in terms of when when you're going to get the peak traffic, because people coming to work there, they're probably going to come to work in the morning and they're going to leave during the evening. The tie-ups really are Portland tie-ups.
Oh, I
going
understand.
into
It's
Portland.
different than
So the point I was going to make is that's, I think, a good thing to look at as part of the legacy project. With how those trips are generated and where they go. And I think that would be part of the picture.
Hi. I just have to make a comment. Personally, I don't see that urban renewal funds should be used for this project. I'm sorry. I think personally, this is a city problem. It needs to go to the city commission, and if the city commission wants to do this, then they need to figure out where they're going to get the money. Personally, I don't think urban renewal funds need to be used for it. Thank you.
Thank you for making that comment. William, you have your hand up.
No, never mind.
All right, very good. I think that concludes the questions on this piece. Yes, one more question.
I actually don't have a question. I have just two quick comments. One, I agree. I've been stuck in the traffic. I'm a Portlander driving back and forth, waiting 3 lights to get through. So it would be nice to resolve the situation. Whatever the city can do as we look at that to help, as Phil mentioned, be great. What I liked, and maybe we can't put them back, I like the little lane dividers. So if you're going through,
I like that too.
just let me go. So if there's a way
But that's off
to
the
do
SMAP,
that,
I think.
yeah, that would be nice to impose it again if we can. I know there's some issues with that with probably state and feds and all those good guys, but that help when you're over in that far lane. Most people in that lane, if they know that blockage is coming, they're not there. They're not trying to bounce around to get around the traffic. You know you're going straight through.
Yes.
Perfect to downtown. So again, I don't know if we can do it. I'm not asking at this point, but just making a comment. I think the other thing we can do if we own those 2 pieces of property is to make sure if we sell those, that we retain that right of way up by McLaughlin. That
It's a huge right of way
that
there.
we have enough feet. If we need to get more feet and redo those lot lines to be prepared, so we have the square footage and don't have to take it back later from someone we sell the property to.
Mr. Chairman.
That's all.
Go ahead.
Well, I just want to, because there's been some questions raised about whether the Urban Renewal Commission and specifically this Budget Committee should approve the funding for the project. So that's what's on the menu tonight, is do you want to fund project funding for this thing that's kind of pretty, as you said, John, 60%. And just a refresher, and I know we have so many issues that come up before the committee, and members might not remember all of the votes that you take, but this was discussed in, let's see here, it looks like November 19th, and also on, September 19th, October 3rd, and then approved by unanimous vote of the Urban Renewal Commission on 5/2 of 2012. So May 2nd of 2012, this project had a different luster about it to some members. And
One more comment. My comment wasn't about this project. My comment was to add another lane. I think that's a
Oh,
city
that
issue.
one. Yeah.
Okay, it wasn't?
Yes.
I misheard.
You're correct.
Yeah, I heard differently. I thought you
Sorry.
wanted to zero this out.
Yeah.
Sorry.
and that
Sorry,
was-
I'll clarify. No.
Thank you very much,
Yeah.
Commissioner Mum. And that actually, I think, moves the question further to
Yes.
Commissioner Edgar's point, which is, I'm not sure you don't want to fund this project, or you just want additional money.
I want to maintain the continued funding. We're leveraging it well.
I just thought for the
We are,
budget
but
committee
what
members.
I am concerned that we plan adequately, because it is a severe or an important choke point that we need to have resolution on, that also affects imagery
I understand.
of people looking at Blue Heron and our whole city as a whole.
Yeah.
Because when
Got
they
it.
come in and they see it's clogged up, hey,
But there'll be pretty stuff there to look at.
While they're sitting there.
You know, I'm gonna use the illustration of GPS.
Go ahead.
So we can recalibrate here. And I do agree with Commissioner Mum that this would be a good discussion before the city, maybe in a work session,
Yeah.
and to explore this and dedicate the time and energy and
Yes.
efforts on the staff, because we only meet once a year.
You're right.
And, I think to do the service to the citizens of Oregon City, that's the best route to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think all the comments have value. There's no doubt about it. Thank you. And just to let you know, since we're talking about GPS and recalibration, we have threaded item 6 in with 5, and for those of you who were wondering if we were going to get to item 6 or agenda 6, yes, we did. And we are now ready to transition to agenda item 7, is the budget review and public comment. Agenda item 7A, budget review, will be presented by Mr. Wyatt Parno, Oregon City's Finance Director. Sir.
Thank you, Chair. I believe we threaded item number 7 into the discussion as
And,
well.
you know,
so-
it's good to have
We're a wild bunch.
review.
Very
And,
good.
Any comments that you care to share?
I appreciate that, Chair. So we do have, this is the simple budget compared to what we had last week, and it's the one page. I believe that the process of the city manager or the budget officer presenting the budget message has been completed, and we've had some really healthy discussion, some of it policy, a little bit related to the budget as well. I think what we're here today to do is to either approve the budget and forward it to the commission, or make some slight changes. But a lot of the policy decisions, this budget's basically based on the policy decisions that have been made in the past. So all of the projects here have been tied into decisions that were made by the commission previously. So with that, I'll just ask if there's any further questions on the budget that I can answer financially.
Please.
It's not a question, but it's a statement. Thank you for putting the rental income in there. I've often wondered if that actually went to the urban renewal.
You're welcome.
So I appreciate that.
Specifics. Thank you. Please, question.
Yes, I do have a question regarding that project. I'm a little confused on, the total amount is, how many million?
4.6.
And how much, and we're committing almost $1 million of that?
900.
And so, of the percentages then, how much is coming from ODOT, how much is coming from?
That coming from ODOT.
Zero from ODOT.
Metro.
Zero?
None from ODOT.
The other part is feds through.
Federal fund
Metro.
passed through ODOT and Metro, so there's several grants involved, and this is the city's portion that we would, that the Urban Renewal Commission's portion that we would pay into the project. The rest would be flowing through, is it ODOT that's administering, John? I believe so, but the rest of the funding package is not a pass-through.
$3 million they're putting in, and we're putting in $1 million, is that what you're kind of saying?
Correct, and some projects have pass-through dollars where it would go through our engineering and we'd pay the whole thing, and you'd see that. This is just the city's portion. The rest is being administered by those agencies.
Question. Under miscellaneous income, sale of property for the 14-15, 300,000, is that just estimating what we're going to sell?
That's just an estimate.
That's for the two houses?
Yes, that's based off the assessed value.
Of the two houses,
Right.
or not including the lots or the,
Right, just two houses.
just the two houses?
Yeah.
And is that just for the houses also for the $20,000 in rental?
The maintenance, is that?
Rental maintenance. Yeah, 20,600 rental maintenance, is that for the houses as well?
Correct, and so
And other rental, yes.
Commissioner Smith?
Did we, I know we're looking at options for those houses, did we actually decide on that already? I can't remember. Did we talk about it, or did we actually vote on selling them?
Well, my recommendation that I wasn't prepared to make that evening at the commission meeting was to sell them, and
But we
then,
haven't had a follow-up discussion on that, I don't think.
That's correct.
no, we haven't had a follow-up discussion.
That was just our last meeting, I think.
I mean, it's for a different topic, for a different time, but in light of, I mean, I think we need to have that discussion a little bit more, in light of how those, I think those two houses were, everyone pretty much in this room knows, those two houses were purchased one time for, what was seen to be happening at the falls in the future, and we might want to think about the fact that those two houses are going to overlook that development, and maybe we do want to have those properties, and really rethink about it. Not for now, but I think maybe we don't want to sell them, or we should have that discussion.
Yeah, it
a little
was,
bit more, how it connects with Willamette Falls.
I think it was the consensus for the commission to direct me to look more into the rental agreements and the deeds.
We'll just bring it back to a future agenda.
And we'll just bring it back to a future agenda.
Mayor?
Yeah, that comes to the question, and I presume it's another piece of property, but you show the sale of property after $300,000 in the second year. Is that the 10th and Main? The property
No,
is.
those are
No,
the
those are
houses.
the rental, those are the rental
Those are the houses,
Yes.
so they are as a budget item here. Yes.
Yes.
At least we've got a year to think about it.
Philip?
I've got a fairly, I don't know if radical is the right word, but it's an important set of issues on this thing. And I written a memo on it, so I thought I'd pass it out to folks. As I pass it out, I would like to say that I really agree with David about the way this commission has worked since I've been on the last 2 years. It's been pretty dysfunctional for a long time. I really don't think it's dysfunctional anymore. I really believe that we're very close to reaching, I mean, even he agrees on public infrastructure.
I know.
Progress.
And it's on tape.
I know. I was thinking that was the beginning of the
I'm like,
Philip, I'm going to have you have an opportunity to respond for the dysfunction. Are we talking about the Urban Renewal Commission, or are we referring to the Urban Renewal Budget Committee?
who's the
Specific, please.
dysfunction group?
Well, I won't go there.
Okay, well, no,
but I
you made
did-
a comment. I'm
Yes.
just following up.
But I do really think, I really want to do a shout out here for the commissioners, who I think are really working well together now, and did not in the past, and to the staff, who I think has really moved this along in that. Now, I'd just like to set the, this is going to take about 5 minutes, and I'll be done quickly, I hope. I'd like to go through what I perceive to be the real dramatic changes that we faced now that we haven't faced before, and come up with some, like I said, fairly radical options about what to do moving forward. First, that we don't have any big projects going on right now. So that's one of the reasons we have consensus, is because the most contentious things are gone. We don't have any developments to argue about. That gives us a breathing room, I think, that we didn't have before. The 2006 Urban Renewal Plan, which is the 10th amended plan, basically created a huge amount of community discord. We don't have to go over that. We spent millions of dollars on it since 2006. We have very little to show for it. It's been a very bad record that we've had in our urban renewal efforts. We have a new charter ordinance that completely changes the game, and I think actually we learned the other night, I thought that was an excellent seminar we did the other night, and we learned, for the folks of you who weren't there, because we have to go for a vote now for any bond, we have the opportunity to get a much more attractive rate than we were otherwise getting, because if we have to go to the voters, then we can go and ask for, if we wish, we can ask for either a GO bond or a full faith and credit bond from the voters. We can still take advantage of the urban renewal district structure, which allows us to do that without increasing people's taxes to pay for the interest, because it comes out of the increment. So we get the best of both worlds, really, in this new world we're in, which requires a vote of the people. We get a lower interest rate if we want to structure it this way. Plus, we get the advantage of utilizing these increments to fund this stuff, so it doesn't increase taxes for people directly. The Blue Heron site is now available, which wasn't available before. It's just it's a complete game changer for me and completely changes how I think we ought to view our urban renewal policies in general. And we've gone through this huge recession, which is still pretty much continuing, I think. Now, what should we do? It seems to me what we ought to do is rethink our basic urban renewal plan. We have been operating on this contentious 2006 plan. Things have changed. They have changed dramatically, and we ought to change with it. We ought to do something that is more prudent with our money than what we've been doing. We have wasted millions and millions of dollars, basically because we've been following a vision that was laid out by Alice and Larry Patterson years ago, caused tremendous community discord. People are still fighting over it. It seems to me we need a new plan. Even if it's the same plan, if people can buy into it, and I think we're almost there. I really do. I think we could reach a consensus, at least my feel, for the people who really didn't like that 2006 plan and who voted for this ordinance. I really don't think they feel the same way about the Blue Heron site. I think we can come up with something different. And by the way, I think we made some fundamental mistakes, but that's just my approach. I just think my goal here in making these proposals is to try to come up with something that really would turn the page and reach consensus in this community and put all this contentiousness behind us. So here are my proposals, specifically line items. First, I would eliminate this $50,000 budget item we have for marketing. I don't think we are doing a very good job of marketing at all. I think we have wasted $45,000 effectively. We haven't marketed anything. Seems to me we could hire a commission salesperson to sell what property we want to sell, give him 5%, be done with it, save $50,000. I would eliminate this if we're going to sell the houses, Rocky, it depends, if we keep them, it's different. But if we're going to sell those houses, which I thought we reached consensus on at our last meeting, there's no reason in a business sense to put $20,000 into them before you sell them. We got to pay Davis Bacon and all that stuff. You'll just sell it and let somebody else fix the house up. So I would knock the $20,000 out for the repairs. I would dramatically reduce the $713,000 in the budget they've got for legal and administrative. $713,000 over 2 years for legal and administrative. We've only got in the budget, even if you approve it, a $262,000 program for storefronts and $425,000 for the rehab program. That's almost a 1-to-1 ratio, administrative cost to grants. That's just way out of whack. It's not 10% at all, David, it's 50%.
Actually, yeah, I just think you're wrong about that. Because you're saying $562,000 is to administer the storefront grant program, and it's not. It's to administer the entire district.
Exactly, but the district isn't doing anything.
Yeah. Well, you can say it's not doing anything because you're on the stump here, but...
we're in a situation where we don't have projects on the table.
That's just false. That's just false. I'm sorry.
Just a quick question, Philip, since you made that, can you empirically back that up?
What up?
The statement as far as the numbers?
Oh, it's in the budget. We've got, on the line item for legal and consulting fees, we've got $75,000 for 2 years. And on administration cost, which is the city's cost for administering our program, is $277 one year and $285 the next. You add $150 and $562, and it comes up to $713,000. And our two administrative programs, the ones that cost our staff to proceed, are basically these two grant programs, plus these major developments which have stopped happening. So that's how I look at it, David.
Okay.
You can inform me of other things, but that's...
Well, I just think, for one thing, we're not in executive session with the Urban Renewal Commission. And the last time we were in executive session with the Urban Renewal Commission, we were told to go do two things with regard to the Cove, shall I say, the current version of the Cove. And if those developers, there's $1 million proposed in this budget for contingency in case those two developers do the two things that they were asked to do by the commission. If they do, there's going to be further discussion. Since we as staff do not know where that discussion is going to lead, we had to prudently budget that money just in case.
You're right, it was executive session. You and I discussed this yesterday.
Right.
I have a different remembrance of that last meeting.
I'm glad, because we have it recorded.
Than you do in terms of where we were headed with that Cove project. But that... I'm sorry, you want to...
Well, I don't know if the chair recognizes me, not you.
Mayor, please.
Yeah. A couple things. One is that we now have 3 brownfields. I mean, we have 3 brownfields.
3 brownfields?
Yeah, we do. I mean, including the Blue Heron site, it's effectively a brownfield. I mean, a lot has to be done before it's developable. That's not, the only portion of that's in the urban renewal district, but a portion of it is. No matter how you look at it, the landfill is a brownfield. No matter how you look at it, the Cove, when we put $100,000 budgeted to put that pathway, and we start putting the pathway in, we uncovered contaminants and increased the cost to $200,000. The Cove, in terms of development, is a brownfield.
Okay, I don't disagree with any of that.
Okay, the point is that though there are project possibilities that are still there.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree at all. I agree with you completely. However, we now have Blue Heron.
Yes.
We now have this ordinance, this charter amendment. We now have differences in situation than we had before.
That's right.
And in my opinion, we should be re-looking at this 2006 plan just so we can get consensus over it. But if I could just finish my line by line, and then we can kind of pop shots at what my next line item. In addition to reducing dramatically the $713,000 for legal and administrative, because I don't think we need to spend that much, I would completely eliminate the rehab program. Now, I've got some specifics about the rehab program. It seems to me this project, this rehab program, fosters cronyism. We keep seeing the same applicants over and over. I think it's an extremely inefficient way to spend our money. It's got high administrative costs and a very low return on the investment. The results of this program...
Excuse me, Philip, this is just a technical issue. We're changing tapes right now, and if you want to have this presented to the viewers, maybe we could just hit the pause.
Our finance director had asked us if we should proceed on with the storefront improvement program and the rehab program, and I think he was given nods that we should do so. I regarded that as a goal of the Urban Renewal Commission. Now, the budget is intended to reflect the goals. We can have a debate on if we want to turn money out of this program and turn money out of that program. That's up to the body here. But the Urban Renewal Commission itself can make decisions in terms of whether money is or redirect. And there was no mention that I recall at any point coming into this meeting by the Urban Renewal Commission to do away with the rehab program.
Can I
And I'm just making my statement, and I finished it. It's up to the body if they want to continue with this or not.
When we got our first rehab grant last year, I looked at this program closely for the first time. Because I was sort of asleep at the switch at our last budget committee. It was presented at our last budget committee basically as a proposal, and then came to us with as basically a done deal with criteria developed by staff and presented to us. I made the noise, as I recall, I don't like this program. Why do we have to do this program? This is a bad program. I've been doing this for 8 months. I was told by David, oh, but you approved of it in the budget. Well, we didn't have a policy discussion of it before the budget, as far as I was aware. David tells me there was held, and I wasn't at the meeting. That's possible.
Well, you missed about 2 or 3. We didn't ever hear they were excused.
I was out of town for a couple of months.
Well, no, you were on speakerphone on some of those, but others, you weren't.
No, I was out of town for a couple of months where I couldn't be on speakerphone. My attendance has not been excellent. I will agree with you. I've been out of town quite a bit. And I did not object to this program when it was put in the budget last year, but I would like to object to it now, and I've got a couple more points I'd like to make about it if I could. To me, this program reeks with cronyism. We keep getting the same applications. 2, it's an extremely inefficient way to spend money. We have to get people to make the applications. We have to review the applications by multiple people on our staff. 3, the results cannot be appreciated by the public. It does not reduce blight because it's indoors, it's not outdoors. It's completely different from the storefront program because the storefront program improves the city. Everybody can see it. These are going on behind closed doors. This development is on the margins. People are either going to develop their property or they're not. Now, if we're trying to increase, say, office and retail in the urban renewal district by spending $425,000 on it, what we're going to be doing basically is increasing the amount of retail and office space in the district. We have vacancy rates that are extremely high in our existing retail and office space in Oregon City. Why do we want to subsidize the creation of more space to further depress rents in Oregon City? It's just not consistent. I own some property that I rent. I have a retail front. I also have a warehouse, by the way, that would qualify under this criteria, I suppose, which, by the way, I presented here, just to show you how we spend this money. If we want to do incentivization of housing downtown, it seems to me there are other ways to do it which don't reek of cronyism, like funding things for quiet zone improvements or doing other things to improve the amenities of downtown residential development. But I don't think downtown residential development is going to work unless the train noise is somehow ameliorated. And then finally, I just don't think this, I used to design programs, energy conservation programs, and other kind of behavior modification programs for a living back in the 80s. And one of the things we needed to do is make a program, in order to, a good design, was to make a program with clear criteria so you could evaluate it when it was done. Did it do the job? Did you want to do it? Well, look at the criteria. I put them here. The criteria are amount of private match, 1-to-1, project increases usable square feet of building for a higher and better use. Okay, so you're basically taking a building and fixing it up. That's any building. Adding to the mixed use activity in the building, which is basically they just want a mixed use. That's all they're trying to accomplish is mixed use. Development experience, increase the value. These are so vague, any building owner would qualify for that. It has to be, the judgment to make it a grant or not make a grant on these criteria is totally within the discretion of our staff and us. There are no standards for this program. It's inside. It's on the margins, and there are more efficient ways. If you want to increase development in this district, why not? If you want to do it, and I wouldn't support this, by the way, but if you wanted to spend $425,000 increasing inside development in the district, give them an across-the-board reduction in SDCs worth $425,000 with no administrative cost. You'd get effectively the same kind of increase. You would get an increase. This grant probably would create a little bit of an increase. If you make things cheap, you'll get more of it. There are more efficient ways to do it, far more, that don't have all these problems. So basically, my little summary of my more than 5 minutes was we have a completely changed situation, and we ought to rethink what we did 5, 6, 7 years ago. Try to reach consensus. In the meantime, go to a bare bones budget and eliminate some of these, in my view, wasteful spending items. So.
Bill, thank you for your comments. Mayor?
Well, first of all, among the two, store grant improvements and rehab programs do create tax increment. 2, I know that a lot of them have actually created more job space in the process and have had increased jobs. Coming to the point of vacancy, indeed during the Arch Bridge closure and the recession, we lost businesses in Oregon in the Main Street, but we gained 2 businesses for every one that we've lost. It's been a success story.
But look at how much vacant space we've got.
But the point is, it's a working system. I mean,
why do we need to subsidize more vacant space? We've got all the vacant space we need.
City manager.
Mayor, is that concluded?
Go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to mention a little bit the comment that you made about the quiet zone. We recognize that that's going to be an essential element for housing downtown, and the staff and I have discussed it. I think our Public Works Department, both our former director and current director, have had some pretty poignant discussions with ODOT about that. And the bottom line is we brought that to the commission with the suggestion that, well, you're going to have to do this at some point, but when do you want to do it? Now, as a private business owner, you probably spend money certainly only when you have to. You wouldn't outlay that money. So right now, we don't have a plan in front of us, so we didn't want to spend the $250,000, but we know that's about what it's going to cost us. So I just wanted you to know that those discussions occurred, because I don't remember if you were there for that discussion or not, but that's an essential element. The second one I wanted to mention is that some of these upgrades that are contemplated are seismic upgrades, and as we know, that's a big impediment for a lot of property owners to try to redevelop some of these older buildings. And if you're going to have, depending on the kind of residential development you're going to have in there, some of those seismic issues have to be addressed. And I think that if the market was there to address them, then they probably would get addressed, but I'm not sure that market is there right now. And if the commission's goal is to stimulate that environment, those seismic issues have to be dealt with on some of those parcels.
The seismic is, and also if you're putting in residential into those buildings, you have to sprinkle them too, and that's a considerable cost.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Thank you, Phil, for what you're doing, what you put down here. I'm very concerned about rebuilding or rehabbing in an effective change of use. Some of the existing buildings, I may be one of the few people here that rebuilt an 1880 house, lifting it up off a foundation. So I gained a lot of knowledge on personal experience here in Oregon City. But I will turn around and say that we need to do full surveys of what a money pit might be to make sure that we're not putting good money after bad when we get into some of these areas where we have major seismic upgrades. I know one building has got a major old boiler that could go into the Smithsonian and an elevator that's equal. But when you go through some of these things, there are problems that could get out of control. And I think that we owe it to us, even if we have it there, I'd like to see it go into contingency funds, much like what Phil was talking about, so that we can play with it in the smartest way that we find at the end, not necessarily pigeonhole it into an encumbered fund, but where we have more flexibility to identify how we use it. Because in the long run, the last walkthrough I had of the Blue Heron Mill site, I saw bones there that are beautiful. I saw opportunity there that in my mind explodes. And I go along with Phil that this is our long run. This is where we have this immense potential. And I would like, in my mind, if we keep our powder dry, keep but improve our readiness to be able to pounce on projects and programs that actually create more halo, more benefit, more long-term gain. I think we're smarter, and I think we're getting in these areas here. To me, it may not be the best priority for us at this time, and I think that there is merit to what Phil has put down here. Let's just use contingency funds in a greater way than IDing it. It's not to say that we as a Urban Renewal Commission can't move it there sometime, but it just is in a contingency area.
Thank you. Commissioner Roth?
Yes, excuse me. I agree with a lot of, well, I disagree and agree with some of the things that Phil has mentioned here. However, what's concerning me is that we're looking at a 2-year budget. And I totally agree that we're working with a very, very outdated urban renewal plan. It doesn't address anything that we're facing in today's economy. And so what frightens me is to look at a 2-year budget taking us into 10 years into an outdated plan. So I agree that we need to maybe step back, take a look at a new plan, or creating a new plan, and tone this down a bit.
Commissioner Mom.
Okay, so I've been pretty quiet, but anyways, I'm sorry, I apologize. I said at the last budget meeting, I apologize, but I want you to know that the plan that we have right now, I disagree. I don't think the general population in Oregon City knows about it. I don't think they have any issues with it. If you're talking about the general citizenship of Oregon City, if you're talking about specific urban renewal businesses, yes, they know about this plan. They might have an issue. I don't know. I don't know that we need to spend money to go create a whole new plan. I do know that when you propose a budget, you take it from what you have been working with your commission. We have been going along this road, having meetings, discussing the rehab program and the storefront grants and, moving along this road. So then staff has prepared this budget along the road that we have gone down, and I understand that we could change it. Personally, I don't think that's a budget issue. I think it's more like a Urban Renewal Commission issue. If we want to amend the plan or change it, I think personally that needs to go before the Urban Renewal Commission, not the Budget Committee. But, you know, you just kind of like, it's like the money pit thing, and it's kind of like, let's pull all this out, the rehab, I don't know, the administration. I have concerns about the legal and consultants fees. I have concerns about that too. Just because the money's there doesn't mean it gets spent. So I think that, you know, I pulled the rug out from under the staff before at the 11th hour, and John Lewis could probably testify to that. So I personally don't think that we need to pull that out of this current budget. It was something that we all sat there and approved. We all went through the criteria. We all looked at the plan.
Can I respond?
Yes.
Philip, please.
All I can tell you is, if you've got a bad program, and I think this is a bad program, I've said so from the very beginning, you should stop funding it. We are wasting, in my view, we are wasting our money on this program. We can more efficiently spend $425,000 to increase development downtown. Why don't we do things that we can see, Betty, rather than things that are inside? This development's going to be on the margins.
I get that, Phil. I get that. But there has not been a lot of activity. I think we've gotten 1 or 2 grants, correct, for the rehab? Is that correct?
We've gotten 2, yes.
So you can't call it a crony plan. It's not the good old boy system. We have, on the storefront grants, we have a 3-year, you can't apply for 3 years.
It's not.
So, you know, I think it still works. I think it works whether it's inside or outside. I think that our buildings are over 100 years old, and why should we not help them?
Because you are...
Okay, I'm going to just hit the pause button.
Sorry, I'm
figuratively. William, you had something you want to say or ask?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the fiscal years ending 2014-2015 urban renewal biennium budget of $8,186,531 and establish the maximum amount of tax from the Division of Taxes shall be levied.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Call the question. Actually, do we have a discussion?
Discussion.
Please. Mayor?
I just wanted to make one point. The contingency coming out of last year was $1,156,000. The beginning fund balance is $3 million, almost $3.5 million. We're projecting a $1.9 million contingency at the end of the first year, and a $1.5 million contingency at the end of next year. We're talking about $225,000. I mean, the thing is, we can do other things. We do have monies in which we can do other things. Urban Renewal Commission can make that statement. The $225,000, which I think these rehab efforts have really resulted in increased jobs in the Main Street. The thing I hear about from many people is that south end of Main Street looks great. It's improving. I hear all that from people all the time. But the point is that rehab program is, whether you're talking about the quiet zone and so forth, we have funds to look at that if we feel we can.
No, my proposal was to zero out the marketing. This is my conclusion. To zero out the marketing, that's $50,000. To substantially reduce the $713,000 we've got allocated for legal and administration, to reflect a reduced workload on this commission, on this district, and to zero out the rehab program.
Yeah, and that's the rehab program is what I was speaking about.
Well, you mentioned the storefront program.
Well, that was a mistake. I meant the 225 on the rehab program. That creates jobs.
Autumn?
I have a question on the Amtrak.
Use the mic, please.
I have a question on the Amtrak station. So we've got in the budget the I guess I'm trying to make sure I'm clear how much we've spent on the Amtrak station with a new potential tenant coming in, and how much is being spent for it year over year. To me, if you're going to do TI, you just do it one time and it should be done. So is the total TIs the $53,000 that's being proposed?
So we got $7,000 that I'm going to spend by the end of this year. So
Okay.
that leaves us, we budgeted $45,000 last fiscal year.
Right.
So
And that's been-
for this fiscal year, it was $45,000. So I'm going to spend $7,000 of that because
Okay.
we've kind of had to go back and redesign some things.
Right.
We've been recruiting a tenant and so forth. So I plan to spend the remainder of that next fiscal year.
Okay, that's what it-
$38,000. And then there's a $15,000 budget line item in there for maintenance, routine maintenance of the property, because we're taking the maintenance over from the general fund. Public Works was doing the maintenance, the routine maintenance
Prior.
on that property.
Okay, I just want to make sure I was clear about that, okay. And then I'm trying not to open up the door over here again, so I just have a couple simple questions.
Go ahead, open up the door.
Okay, so under the storefront program, they cannot reapply for 3 years. Is that the same under the rehab program?
For 3 years?
Is there a prohibition?
We put a limit on it.
How many times?
We were
We ignored
going
that
to
one.
discuss that for the next fiscal year.
Okay,
For
so
that-
if there's nothing there, I guess I put that back to the budget committee, or the commissioners on the Urban Renewal Commission. Please put something in there to
Yes.
discuss that. I would also, again, it's just a comment, that making sure if if they're applying for one and then the other, that we're being mindful about one group or one individual pulling from both funds, that you are spreading the funds around for proper usage throughout the community. So, and being involved in the commercial real estate industry, in the lending side, there is very little to no money for people who want to go and rehab their buildings, for retrofitting, for earthquake, if you want to change use. As you said, fire issues, there's basically no money for that. So if you want to get those buildings occupied, getting rental income, jobs in the community, you have to help these people get these 100-year-old buildings moved. But there needs to be a return. They need to do something positive with that. So I guess it's just a comment. So with that, I will call for the question.
Sean, you had something.
I just had one more statement.
The question's been called.
Question's been
Oh,
called.
I'm sorry, I thought we
Well,
were going to vote.
Okay, call.
Discussion?
We're still in discussion.
This was just one last piece of
Yeah.
discussion on this.
I think in fairness.
I just want to remind the group that there's 4 different groups made up here. And so as an Urban Renewal Budget Committee member, I'm out of much of the discussion that seems like city commissioners and a couple urban renewal commissioners continue to have, and it's that way every year. I want to compliment city staff on a budget well done. Last year, we had one item that I remember, it was something like street sweeping the sidewalks that we pulled out. It made a lot of sense, but I don't see those odd pieces in here. And I think that some of this discussion needs to go back to these larger bodies and have citizen testimony. It's not the place to be changing the entire game.
Right.
A sidewalk issue, that's different, and so that's why I support the budget as presented.
And Sean, as a citizen of Oregon City, I agree with you.
Yes.
100%. Okay, call the question on the motion.
I'd like to have a roll call for this one. Okay, Betty Mum,
Aye.
William Gifford,
Aye.
Phil Yates,
No.
Sean Datchler,
Aye.
Paul Edgar,
Aye.
Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Laura Zentner is not here, Kathy Roth,
Aye.
Chris Geiger,
Aye.
Doug Neely,
Aye.
Robert Stoll,
Aye.
Autumn Rudisil, Carol Pauley, Aaron Olson.
Aye.
Motion passes 12 to 1. 12
Thank
yes,
you.
1 no.
Thank you. And we are now on item number 9. We are going to be adjourning this meeting. I want to thank all of you for your participation and spirit of cooperation in making this an effective and productive meeting. Since there is no further business, this meeting is adjourned.